Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Carlson Cards podcast. It's been a few weeks. We're back with another episode. This one should be a ton of fun. We have on Mikey Osborne, who is one of the greatest, I would say, historical greatest Randy Moss collectors from what I've followed on Instagram. And just, again, to name a few, there's other players he does collect besides Randy Moss. But I think a lot of what we'll touch on today is Randy Moss, kind of his journey, evolution over time. And then I know from talking to Mikey, some of the cards he acquired, he's let go of. So it'll be interesting to understand what the thought process is there, why right now, and what, he views his collecting moving forward. So Mikey, first off, thanks for hopping on. It's good to see you face to face too. I know we've chatted a bit over time on Instagram, so it's nice to see you.
Good. Yeah, Austin, I think I really see this as like a middle ground because a lot of my network of friends on Instagram throughout the hobby, I only interact with them on social media. And it's always really nice when I get to see somebody at a show in person. And so I think doing this podcast is going to be our first step to us meeting in person, hopefully maybe at the National this year.
Yeah, I'd love that. And I know if I recall correctly, I just saw this, now you mentioned that this last National, you had a fun experience pulling a pretty crazy card from a pack, didn't you? With Pack Nicholson, if I recall. I saw your video online. What was the story with that? What was that show?
Yeah, so we were at the National in Cleveland, and John and I, who goes by Pack Nicholson on Instagram, him and I have known each other since middle school, actually. And sometime when I started sharing some of my collecting journey online, he reached out and said that he had a passion for it. And him and I went to the National last year together, and we were actually at an event. So I lead growth marketing and technology at Collectors and PSA. And so we were at an event for PSA at the National, and we were opening up a box of 1999 Metal Universe hobby football. And I pulled a Moss Lynch pins, which it's a $200, $300 card on its best day, but in the box is worth that or more. But the feeling of pulling your player and the pack odds on that card is like 1 in 3,000 or something like that at the player level. So it's pretty cool.
I had on Sal has cool cards a few episodes. I mean, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 episodes
Yeah,
ago.
and he pulled the Favre, right?
Yeah, what the heck are the chances? I think you posted first, and then a few days later, or maybe that same day, then he posted, and it was like, what the heck? And it's both of your players, which is kind of the crazy thing too.
Yeah, I think that's like the coolest thing. I don't open up a ton of wax, but here and there I'll do it with friends. And over the last year, I pulled that Lynch pins. But then a little over a year ago, I was at the office in Santa Ana at PSA, and we were doing some box breaks, and I pulled a 99 Moss Legacy, which was also pretty cool. So anytime you get to pull your player, there's no better feeling.
Yeah, especially with the old boxes that you probably have nostalgia for, or at least have always, enjoyed the cards from and getting a chance to open them. And there's got to be a scent to those things too. I bet I haven't
Yeah.
opened any of these old boxes, but there has to be just the whole feeling involved is very essential.
Yeah. And all this time, the reason I was always opening 99 metal football is I was hoping to pull the Moss Gym Masters because I didn't think it had been pulled. I had never seen it. And then it turns out that it had been in somebody's collection for like the last 30 years, and it changed hands like 6 months ago. And so I kind of stopped that dream.
Yeah, at least save some money there.
Yeah.
Those are interesting, and maybe you can inform me here, but I recently learned some of those 90s one of ones, there's 2 copies. Is that correct? Is the Gem Masters the same story there?
Yeah, I don't know if the Gym Masters is. I think it could be. Many of the sets that I've seen it affect are usually like in the Ultra line. So there's masterpieces within Fleer Ultra, and a lot of times I've seen them duplicate copies across not only football but baseball and basketball as well.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. And it's like a replacement copy, right? Is that what that comes from?
Yeah, and the reason they got out is many of these sets that we're talking about were produced by Fleer.
Mhm.
And when Fleer went bankrupt in the late 2000s, a lot of those copies made it out into the market.
Yeah, backdoor copy, as they say.
Yeah, but the cool thing about it, and I've talked to so many collectors who are much more knowledgeable on the topic than me, is like I don't think it's hindered people's perception of them. And so as long as you have the knowledge and and there's some collectors that actually own both copies. So you know?
That gives you
And
something more to chase after. But I
yeah,
think part of it too, and maybe, your perspective there, I think probably why it does matter as much is because at least you know the origin story of why there's two versus if you're just I'd imagine if there's a, I'm just making this up, but if there is a set out there, like the black finance for Panini, if all of a sudden
yep,
there's two of them and we have no idea why or how many there actually are, that would probably destroy some legacy there, I'm sure.
for sure. Yeah, and I think generally too, I've found with 90s cards, like, one of ones and gem masters and masterpieces should be kind of like the number one grail, but there's something lonely about owning a one of one, especially in a time where they didn't produce that many as they do today. And so I think that's why we see the like single digit copies of cards like credentials and other stuff like 24 karat actually have a little bit more popularity, is because more people can own them rather than just one person who has the deepest pockets.
Yeah, well, and maybe too, yeah, because your point, the deepest pockets thing, because it goes from okay, regardless, any of these cards are probably pipe dreams or not. You can't just
Yeah.
outright get one. But I think to your point, some of these one of ones, if you know they're somewhere, like you said with that moss, it's like, well, I don't think you're sitting here dreaming about acquiring that one unless you fall into some money or something, or if
Mhm.
that because you rely on that person actually selling it to you as well, which makes it twice as hard.
Yeah, and the market reflects it too. I think just recently in May, Peyton Manning legacy from maybe his rookie year, one of one masterpiece sold for like $6,000, which
Mhm.
is a good bit of money, but it doesn't pale into comparison what like his rookie PMG does or some of his low numbered credentials.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So to kind of jump a bit here, Mikey, I'd love if you could maybe give anyone listening who doesn't particularly know you or maybe has heard you in other podcasts but would like to know your background a little better. Could you just step me through like the quick hobby history for yourself? Where did it start? Where did it go? Where are you now?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to fill in the blanks there, that'd be great.
Yeah, we can wind the clock back all the way to 1998, and that was when I was 10 years old. I was definitely a collector, but I was also really starting to get fascinated with football because I was playing myself. And I was sitting on the couch on Thanksgiving Day, and the Cowboys and Vikings came on, and I watched Randy Moss torch the Cowboys for 3 touchdowns, 163 yards on 3 catches. And since that day, he's been my number one athlete. He's been my idol, so much so that like my dog is named Randy. And if you flash forward to like growing up and becoming an adult in 2018 is when I got back into the hobby, and it was really just kind of random. I was at Walmart and was getting some medicine for my sister, and I picked up a box of Panini Draft Picks Prism, and the feeling that I had when I opened up one of those packs just like rushed all of that nostalgia back into me. And I've slowly kind of progressed in my collecting since then, really focused on moss, but I'm also a player collector. So I have a really extensive Victor Oladipo collection, and I have an affinity towards him because I went to Indiana University at the same time he was playing there. And then all of that kind of transformed into me making this a career. So since 2022, I've been on the collectors and PSA team. I lead our growth marketing and technology organization there. And that was really cool for me because I've always worked in marketing and technology, but this was an opportunity for me to really marry my personal and professional passions. Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of like the quick elevator pitch on what my hobby journey has been like.
Has it been a happy marriage, would you say? Do you feel like you can still enjoy the hobby when it's also paying the bills?
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed things for me. Um, Not necessarily for the amount of time I dedicate to the hobby, but how my time's partitioned. So,
Mhm.
like, if before I worked at PSA, I was on eBay and doing card related things for 50 hours a week, like, I still am about that time commitment, but obviously a lion's share of that time is just dedicated to my professional job. And I think it's just also given me a little bit more perspective on what's important, and also made me realize the importance of like a network and being able to meet people in the hobby, and that being a little bit more important than maybe just like collecting as many cards as possible. So my collection, I don't know if it's gotten any better since I started working at PSA, but the people I've met and the relationships I've made have definitely strengthened since I started working there.
It's funny you put it that way because I felt I can resonate a lot with what you're saying, and I talked about in the prior episode of this was the fact that I feel like, and I'm noticing this is a trend in the winter for me. I get the burnout of like really, for some reason, really criticizing what I purchase, like very heavily, like, okay, normally I'll buy a card and it's like, it's going to my collection. I sold a few of these things to pay for it. That's great. But right now I'm very like, "Oh, I don't know if I want to buy anything right now. I think I'm good to just hunker down for a few months." But I do notice, to tie back to what you said, the relationship side is what I really still enjoy. Like I went to a card show this past week and got to hang out with my friend Andrew, and like just sitting and talking and connecting through the cards, that never gets stale, I guess, maybe what I'm getting at. So I can totally
Yeah.
relate with what you're saying, and that makes sense to me.
For sure. And I'm all about variety too. I think like for anybody consuming your podcast via video, you'll see behind me there's no sports cards and just a wall of Pokemon cards. And so I'm very passionate about Pokemon and collecting Pokemon cards. Something I set to the side that I was going to talk about too is a new little venue that I've gotten into, and these are Type 1 photographs. And so I've got one here of Randy Moss, which is basically just a photograph that was developed from the original negative within 2 years of the photo being taken. And so I also collect Power Rangers toys. Like I'm just a collector, and I also am just always trying to make my adult life mimic the way I felt when I was 10 years old. That's kind of my ultimate goal.
That's awesome. Great inspiration, way to collect, that's for sure. And you mentioned the Pokemon stuff behind you. I know you just posted that, I think yesterday or early late last night. Um,
Yep.
what was the inspiration? Dive into that. I think on the post I saw you mention your daughter and her maybe getting into things. Like now that I have a kid, I'm noticing the fact that my brother and I have been collecting little Pokemon again. Coincidence, because you are. It's like I love the fact that she thinks that's cool. So I'm like, crap, if she's really into soccer, I hope to get her really into football because that's what I enjoy collecting. But I can totally see how kids kind of influence that side of things. So is that kind of your story here as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, as a new dad, I think when you have a daughter, it's tough because stereotypically you would want to have a kid that's going to be into sports and more masculine things maybe that you would be into. And so I think Pokemon for us was such a happy medium, and all it took was me showing her some old episodes of the original series. She got really into it. And then when I showed her some of the more modern shows that they've put out, she really started to like it, especially because the animation's a little bit more modern and things like that. And so over the past year, we've consumed like hundreds of episodes of Pokemon on Netflix. I started to introduce her to cards, and that's when I decided that I was going to start to put together a set of all of the first edition Pokemon cards from when I was a kid as a way to continue to kind of share the passion of Pokemon together, but also start to put together a collection that I knew um, I could pass down on to her and she
Yeah.
would see value in, as opposed to like if I dropped dead a few years from now and my wife and daughter came in my studio and found a bunch of like Randy Moss cards they wouldn't know what to do with. So
Put him in Will for the dog, Randy. He can have
yeah,
him.
exactly. Yeah,
No,
exactly.
that's a great point, though. I didn't think of it that way, but and because I'm not at that point yet, but I know for a lot of people, especially older people that I talk to at card shows or through this or that sort of thing, a lot of the way they view it is to pass down, and I think you hear that story a lot in this. You see. Like estate sales where somebody died and wanted to pass on their family. They didn't care about it. Just,
Yep.
gets auctioned, whatever. But the fact that you can tie that to your daughter in a way that she likes, I think that's pretty cool. I wouldn't have thought of that, but that totally makes sense.
Yeah, I have a goal. I don't know if it's going to pan out the way I want it to, but because I've gotten more and more interested in Pokemon cards recently, um, I'm actually going to start to kind of like be more of a dealer in this space. And so my plan next year is to actually set up at some of the local shows, just buying and selling Pokemon at a table. But I want to bring her with me, and it'll be an opportunity not only to continue to strengthen the bond we have in that area, but also another opportunity as she gets older to see what it takes to kind of have a business and make something yourself. So if it all works out, then I'll have an even better story to tell down the road.
You're telling me the strategy isn't just to drop her off and tell her to give her a dollar card and tell her to do a trade up
Trade
challenge
up
and go
challenge.
bug all the dealers all day and
Yeah.
then
I'm gonna send her with my first edition Charizard
yeah,
and do trade up challenge and see what
yeah.
happens.
Yeah, see what the first dealer does to her. No, that's funny. That's awesome. So Mikey, I'm gonna actually hop over to some of the photos you shared, if that works with you,
Yeah.
and we can kind of touch on some of the cool cards that you have owned and some of them that you do currently own. So to kind of start, I'd love if you could kind of, especially since these are the four that you have owned but now no longer do. I'd love you just first, before we talk about where these went, just what do you like about them? I guess number one, what is the card? What did you like about them at the time? And that sort of anything that kind of ties into what you feel, how you feel about these cards. So and start with
Definitely.
anyone you like as well.
Yeah. All four of these kind of I could speak about the same way, but when I got really focused on moss collecting and as my goal ultimately was to be the best moss collector in the world. And player collecting is hard. We touched on it a little bit at the beginning of the episode, and collecting some of these cards when there's only 5 or 20 copies of a card that was produced 30 years ago, you can't just hop onto eBay or one of the marketplaces and find them. So all four of these cards that I've acquired over the past 5 years were hundreds and hundreds of hours of conversations and networking and searching. And little by little, I acquired each one. The Credentials Future on the right, which is serial numbered out of 6, was a big acquisition that I made at the 2023 National. And that card really was a culmination of all the hard work that I have done in the moss collecting realm. When I made the deal for that card, I traded like 35 different cards around like $50,000 in value to get it. And I truly believe that it would be buried with me. Um, and I think over the last year, some things kind of changed. The market really heated up. But the biggest thing that changed for me, and the reason that I decided to part way with these cards, is because I was starting to get a little bit too competitive in collecting. And I also realized that I was never going to be able to reach my goal of being the top moss collector. And because of that, I decided almost like what I like to call it is like reverse consolidation. So we hear a lot of people in our circles talk about the concept of consolidation, which would be taking, a couple dozen of the cards that aren't your best ones in your collection, liquidating them so that you can move into like a single card. And the reason I call this reverse consolidation is I could have sold the 40 other examples of moss cards that are in my collection that I love in order to free up capital to do other things in the hobby. But by selling these four that I've had a long time to enjoy and have a part of my collection, I can still hold on to all the other cards and still have like a really expansive collection, but then also have the capital to like, you know, put my daughter through school and do things for my family, and then also like guilt free go into these other areas of collecting, like Pokemon and other things, without really being strapped for the funds to do it.
Yeah, I've noticed it's kind of a strange thing, and I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but part of my issue, I think, right now is to a lot of this. The era that I've collected is, some of this, but really, I never got into the '90s so much. It kind of made like a couple, so a couple Moss rookies, a couple Manning rookies, but nothing obscene. And then I've really done the 2000s. But what I've noticed is over the last 12 months, especially, it's like the market's heated up, which is cool. I mean, that's great. I mean, people are realizing they like these cards, and that's amazing. But the funny thing is, I think for a lot of us, it's like, okay, we love collecting these cards, but it's kind of a lie to say that we don't pay attention to what the value of them are. And I feel like over time, what has happened now is coincidentally, I've realized I don't like when they go up in value actually, because may sound silly, but and kind of spoiled to maybe say this, but the fact is then I start to feel guilty about owning them because I know I got this card for $500 and now there's sales for 3,000. And then I
Yep.
think to your point, wow, that's a year of private school for my daughter. That is, if I put it in now, that's likely $15,000 for future college when she's in college. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, how do you justify this stuff? So when you messaged and said, some of these I don't have anymore, I was like, that's interesting because I have been doing a very similar thing, and I'm curious if our thoughts are the same. So it's interesting to hear your perspective. And have you kind of noticed the same thing? Like it's, again, great to see the market does well, but when you own them, do you kind of get that guilt? I think you said the word guilt. Does that kind of come to you a little bit as well?
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, like there's only like a certain time span of enjoyment that I can have for these cards. I can only take so many photos of them and like keep them on my desk and look at them so much. And um, I'd say the two biggest factors to me moving them were what we're talking about here, and just the fact that like the market for these cards has exploded so exponentially. The future, for example, I that was the toughest one to move because I knew if I sold it, I would never find another one.
And remind me the
But
numbering. I know you said it, but it was like 8 or 9, or what was it?
Yeah, so the credentials feature is serial numbered out of 6.
6, okay.
And
Yep.
so my copy was 3 of 6. And I know I'm not going to replace that card. But the other cards in this picture, which are still super rare, the network and the knowledge that I've been able to gather in the Moss market, like I can replace these cards and probably could replace them for cheaper than I just sold them for, just because I've done all the work required to know where they are. I could probably rattle off where like over 5 examples of each of these other cards are that like if I really wanted to, I could go obtain. But the other reason that I ended up selling them is of the collector of the collection that they went into. And so I think going back to the importance of like building a network and making relationships in the hobby, none of these cards on the screen you're going to be able to find on Card Ladder or were for sale on a marketplace. They were all sold to a private collection of somebody that I know is going to cherish them for a really long time and also isn't going to like pimp them out on social media and all that stuff. So there was something about that that I really liked as well, and ultimately made the decision pretty easy for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I love hearing the mindset, especially, for yourself, especially on the difference between the 3 where you can, a lot of these are lowest numbered I'm seeing, right, is the 24 karat, that's out of
Yep.
24. What the 98 PMG and 99 or 98 rubies, sorry, I can't see, my screen so blurry. Those are both out of 50, correct? Or the rubies out of 30?
Yeah, Rubies is out of 35 for the rookie
35.
year issues, and Skybox Premium, and then yeah, out of 50 for the precious metal gems. So like those cards are out there.
Mhm.
I actually was just an underbidder on another example of the rubies that ended on eBay last night, and so like I could replace it if I wanted to, but instead I'm gonna try to focus on just like going into new territories of collecting and see where that brings me.
Yeah. It's all about enjoyment, right? That's what we're doing. So if you can find more enjoyment elsewhere and not feel guilty about doing so, I feel like it's kind of a no-brainer. That's what I'm learning. I always, you kind of get I don't know about yourself, but because like you said, you go to cards, I do buy and sell cards, but the ones that go into my collection and I post on my Instagram, like those, it takes a bit to get, wrap your head around letting go of some, but once you do, it's a little easier. And it's, obviously important when life hits you sometimes. So
For
yeah,
sure.
appreciate the insight. So next photo, I think we dubbed before this call as the Infinity Gauntlet. I think that's right. So for those of you that can see, Mikey, if you want to maybe mention what you like about this photo and what kind of, again, you feel about this one.
Yeah, the first photo and the second photo, when they popped up on the screen, still was like a little twinge in my heart because I miss being able to put together a curation like this. But I like to refer to this as the Infinity Gauntlet or the Infinity Stones. I think for late 90s collectors, we know the importance of all of these sets. But the tie in to like the Avengers and the Infinity Gauntlet is really interesting when you look at these because they're so colorful. Like the card designs 30 years ago are much better than they are today. And so that's kind of how I always referred to them. But yeah, I miss being able to take photos like this.
Could you rattle off the parallels just for those that don't have the visual?
Yeah, definitely. So from right to left, we're looking at the Essential Credentials Future from 1998, EX 2001. That's serial numbered out of 6. And then its little brother right next to it is the Neon Green Parallel, which is the Credentials Now out of 55. And the Rookie Star Rubies out of 35. The 24 karat from the Lone Year Fleer Brilliance, which is arguably one of my favorite Randy Moss cards featuring him
The
and his
color match.
yeah, in the pro jersey number 84, you can see these other examples. He has like his practice preseason jersey on, and then the precious metal gems and for 98 and 99, which would be his rookie and second year examples. I'm lucky enough to still own a couple of those cards that we'll get to in the next photo, but I miss having this whole group together.
Would you describe a word as nostalgia yet for these? Like, do you, even though it's recent enough where you had them recent enough, do you still have like, is it already nostalgia? Is that a
Yeah,
word
it's
you could say for
interesting.
some of these?
Yeah. At first, I thought you were saying like they're just the epitome of nostalgia, which I think they are. But the interesting thing about it is I was collecting when these cards were produced, but I was so young and naive and didn't have the knowledge I have to now that I didn't know any of these cards existed back then because, there wasn't social media and the internet and things like that. And so unless you're reading like the Beckett cover to cover or reading like the fine print on the bottom of a pack, you would never even know these existed, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. All right, now we'll jump over to your Mount Rushmore of cards that you kept and stuck around. So it'll be interesting to hear your perspective on why these were the ones that you wanted to keep. Especially, I'd love to know if you have any cool acquisition stories for any of these, because a lot of them, I think too, some of these are unique parallels and cards that maybe in football so much we don't hear as much about, especially the one on the right I'm thinking of. But I know in other sports you hear about it a lot.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'd love if
definitely.
you could just kind of step through these in any order you want, and just a reminder again to share the parallels so those who are just listening can know what we're
For
talking about.
sure. Yeah, I'll go right to left since you called out the Leaf Crusade Red. This is a card that you don't see very often in general, but the Crusade Red set for baseball is one of the most highly coveted sets. The King Griffey Jr. from that year specifically is a card that is valued upwards of $50,000, $60,000. And what I think we've found is in football, sets like precious metal gems and essential credentials are garnering so much attention, and the value of them are going up so much that the other cards that are on the screen here are ones that people haven't really thought about. And the Crusade Red, I think there's one public sale of this in 2012 that you can find on Card Ladder. And so to be able to get a copy of it, serial numbered out of 25 and a PSA 10 is pretty special for me. And the
Yeah.
one to the left of it is the Skybox Thunder Super Rave, which is also serial numbered out of 25. And like we talked about before, rookie cards from the late 90s and specifically with Moss vary as far as showing and featuring him in his college and pro uniform. And for a long time in my collecting journey, I actually tried to stay away from these types of cards because for whatever reason, they didn't do it as much for me. But I've started to kind of appreciate the fact that it's showing him in like a game action photo, and I've started to like them a little bit more. So these are two recent additions, both the Super Rave out of 25 and the Crusade Red out of 25 that feature him in a college jersey that I've really started to grow to appreciate.
So for the Super Rave, for those again listening that aren't super familiar with the parallel, what's the distinction here between a base card? Because I feel like for a lot of people, you're gonna see the same set, the Skybox Thunder, you see a base card, and then you hold the Super Rave next to other, especially in a scan, and maybe it's not overly clear what the difference is, but I know in person the difference is drastic and it's very noticeable.
Yeah, definitely. So the base version of the Skybox Thunder and the two parallels, which are Rave and Super Rave, the Rave being out of 150 and the Super Rave being out of 25. The differences between the three are very subtle. But with the Super Rave that we're looking at here, the player's name in the top right and then the Thunder logo in the bottom right feature. I don't even know what to call it, but it's
Is it like a Gem Masters design for one of those years?
yeah. So
Or I
football
forget what it
use
is.
football uses technology for 99 Gym Masters, but then basketball used this print technology for 1997 Star Rubies Series 2, which is kind of like the speckled gold pattern, which is like amazing in hand and in person, but it's very subtle on these cards. And the other parallel from Skybox Thunder has a similar design, but a little bit different of a refractor finish. It's more of like a refractor, I guess, for lack of a better word. But yeah, I love it. Series 2 basketball Star Rubies is one of my favorite cards. And then the 99 Gym Masters and across football, basketball, and baseball, again, that card design is something I love. I wish this card would have had it more than just like where the nameplate is, but it's still pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. And these two as well. So I know you mentioned, for instance, the Crusade, there's really only been one public sale that you can see, or at least the most recent was 2012. How much of your network was important with this, or how important was your network with acquiring these two? Is what I meant to say.
Yeah, all
Like with all
yeah.
of it.
Both of these were private deals that I acquired them in, so I wouldn't have been able to find them without my network. But that's the cool thing is that like if you meet enough people and they know what you're looking for, you'll always get a shot at cards. They might not be at a price that seems reasonable to you, but at least I think thing that I valued the most in collecting over the years is like I just want to know where a card is, even if I don't have the opportunity to obtain it. If I know where it is, I'm gonna remember it, and then someday I can come back and like really fight for it. But the Crusade Red, I knew a collector that had it, and I might have ended up acquiring it like 6 months after I first saw it. So it was just one of those things where like you let them know that you have interest, check in from time to time, and then finally they're going to come back and say, "Hey, I'm ready to sell this," and you're going to be the first buyer.
Yeah, and that's a really good point there because I've bought cards in that way, and I've also sold cards in that way where somebody maybe asked about something, and I have like, there's no chance, sorry, but I'll keep you in mind. And then I'm kidding myself because then like 6 months later, I go back, who the heck mentioned this? And then I go back and find the name, and I'm like, oh, and then you offer it, and a deal happens right away. So I think it's understated how important that is to at least just pitch it out there. That just let me know if that changes in the future because I think that happens a lot more than people think.
For sure. The other two cards on the screen are the rookie credentials now. So this is the little brother to the credentials future that we talked about earlier in the show. This is at a 55. I think this is a more obtainable example of like a credentials moss rookie since there's 55 copies, but one that's still pretty scarce and you don't see it pop up too often. I've owned two copies of this. This is the second copy that I've owned. The first one actually had like a crack in the acrylic
Hmm.
of the card, and so it was very low grade, like a PSA 4 or something like that. This one I was able to obtain through a longtime collector who actually has a crazy story to it. Um, I found this card on Instagram of somebody who posted it, and they had like 10 followers, and they just put hashtag Randy Moss on it. I reached out to him and then learned that he obtained this through a relative of his that passed away that had left a safe, like a small gun safe to him that he wasn't able to get open for 3 years. And then when he finally got it cracked, he opened it up and found this, a few other cards, and like some Kobe Bryant cards. And so that, you know, I always love that story because sometimes you find cards in the weirdest places.
Yeah, was it, did it sound like it was a situation where the person who stored it aw well, clearly the person stored it away, if they store it in a safe, they know what they have. But,
Mhm.
sometimes these cards from the '90s, it's like they last 30 years stowed away, and then I don't know, sometimes you hear, like, person had no idea that it's worth the type of money it is or how rare it is
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah, I've definitely run into those situations too. And they would have been right to not know that it had value really up until like 5 years ago, because like the credentials now, which historically is sold like every few years or whatever, you could have bought this card in like a True Gem Plus example listed on PWCC in 2018, the year that Moss got elected into the Hall of Fame, for like $1,500, and now it's like a $10,000 to $15,000 card. So like the value is just ballooned so much over the years that somebody that's not following it every day would never have an idea of how much it's appreciated.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And now just curiosity wise, you mentioned you let go of the future that you probably can't get back again, but you chose to keep the now. Is that strictly because out of preference, like you like this one more and the bang for the buck, if you compared the two, it just made sense? Or was it just a strict factor of I sell the future, I just have to sell the one card and I get so much money back, might as well just sell that one?
Yeah, no, you're thinking the right way, and like that's what like I sold the credentials future because it had much more value in order
Hmm.
to sell it. But knowing that I was keeping the now was kind of nice because I still had an example from that year. And the same goes for the 99 precious metal gems that's right next to it on the screen. I sold the rookie precious metal gems, which again has more value, but I actually prefer the 99 precious metal gems. It features Moss in a pro jersey. It's got the gold hollow foil design, which I really like. And it allowed me to still have like a PMG of his in my collection.
Awesome. Yeah, it totally makes sense. Amazing cards. How much of a drawback do you feel the college well, okay, I'll let you rank these. Do you prefer college, pro, or practice? If you had to like, is there a power ranking there for yourself? If you had to pick like on any of these, which you would rather have in what order?
Yeah, I'd want pro
Of
all
course.
day. And I think I go back and forth between like the practice jersey and the college jersey. But the reality, especially for Randy Moss rookie cards, is that with the exception of like the Fleer Brilliance and some later in the year sets that were released that don't have as premium rookies for Moss, you're hard pressed to find any where he's not in his number 18 practice jersey or his Marshall jersey. So, um, you know, rookie cards are obviously something that people covet in collecting, and it's something that's important to me. But I've found myself really enjoying more of his like second year cards because he is in that pro jersey. And the other thing I like about his second year cards is Moss really came onto the scene in his rookie year at Minnesota, and set all kinds of records for receiving that year. And all those stats are printed on the back of his second year cards, which I think is pretty cool.
I feel like it's also, I always remember to, all right, what you're saying right there is exactly why I like the 2008 Topps Chrome Red for Moss that I have, because it
Oh yeah,
shows what is it? I don't remember
rookie
the touchdown total. It's
23
absurd though.
touchdowns.
I was gonna say 27, but I was like, that was too high. So
Yeah,
23.
23
Yeah.
touchdowns. And so, yeah, I agree. I think there's something to be said for that, which I find really cool.
Yeah. So the rest of the Moss collection is out of curiosity. So we've talked about a lot of rookies. Do you dabble up into like the and second year, sorry, but do you dabble up into the 2000s at all, or do you stick pretty close around that era? And if you do get up to the 2000s, what kind of stuff do you go after out of
Yeah,
curiosity?
definitely. Yeah, and I still have like around 40 Moss cards that go all the way up to about 2004. So if you could
Sure.
think of any of the key parallels from any of those sets in those years, like I've got those cards in my collection. I know one that you really like is the O2 Finest X Fractor out of 20. I've got that one.
I think also in
And
a 10, right? Do you have the other 10?
yeah,
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 yeah. I don't remember if it's
yeah.
top 2 or 3 or 4, but I know I thought you had one of the other ones, so,
That's right.
yeah.
And so, yeah, another one I really like is like the 2000 Certified Mirror Gold is an awesome card.
See, you know what's hilarious, Mikey, is I was going on your page today, and I was gonna say, if I have 5 minutes to end, I'm gonna mention to him that I want that if he ever posts it. I recently got added a Jerry Rice, I have a Peyton Manning. It's just like one of those parallels where I play or collect Peyton Manning, but not Jerry Rice, but, like, you have a parallel you really like. Man, these guys are cool in that set. I just think it's
Yeah.
such an awesome set.
And because you probably own some copies of it,
Yeah.
but that one in hand too doesn't do it justice. And it's so funny because I've had two or three other people say that exact thing about that specific card is
Mhm.
like, hey, you're selling your cards. Can I have dibs on that one? And so I think the Mirror Gold and the X Fractor definitely fall into that camp. But I'm also a really big fan of some of the 99 set designs that had like the lenticular
Oh,
pattern or
yeah.
like the warp tech pattern. And so like Millennium Men and some of those Atlanta Attitude warp
Yeah.
tech. I love those cards. I'm a big fan of Platinum Medallion and Legacy Collection. I like Topps Gold Label. I've got all those. My collection used to be even more expansive, going all the way through his playing days. I had the
Sure.
complete run of Bowman Chrome Gold and Topps Chrome Gold when they um, printed those. But at a point like 18 months ago or something like that, when I was doing some consolidation, I kind of trimmed it down to only focus on the ones where he's in a Vikings jersey and like the sets that I actually appreciated the most.
Yeah, awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah, just curious. I know I always remember seeing the 2000 stuff, but I was curious what you kept on to. So that makes sense. Do you feel like
Yep.
40 is a pretty healthy number for you? Like, do you like being at that point? And I guess
Yeah.
where does that 40 number come in? Does it just happen to be that way, or it fits perfect in like a one row box or something?
Yeah, it's more the latter, and it was, like, actually, like, an aspirational thing. I thought it
Mhm.
would have ended up being, like, 40 of his best cards that had the most value, and since I sold my my 4 best cards, I kinda went backwards on that, but,
Yep.
yeah, I'm not one to like to own a lot of slabs,
Mhm.
um, and even though I work at PSA, like, I have very extensive albums and binders of cards that like some of the cards in there are 500 $1,000, and I actually just prefer to keep them in binders. But for my Moss collection, I always had a goal that I could keep them in like a single one row case that held 30 to 40 cards, and I've been able to achieve that now, and it's pretty nice. I like it.
Random kind of maybe funny question for you because you work for PSA. So we're closing in, I think, is it 100 million? Is that what the cert number will be?
Yeah, we've already passed it.
Oh, we have. Okay.
Yeah, so
Crazy.
we've already passed it, and I can't remember. We just were talking about it the other day, but I'm pretty sure it's a Michael Jordan or a Ken Griffey card that was the 100 millionth
Wow.
cert, which just so everybody knows, like every time you put in a card in the online submission center on PSA, like you're building a submission, it will create a unique cert number for it. That doesn't mean we've graded 100 million cards, but it just creates the certification number. And we just recently passed over 100 million certs. And cert number 1 million, I can't remember if it was a Jordan or a Griffey card, but I thought either one of them are our top 2 graded athletes all time. So I thought that was pretty cool. And since I work on the marketing team, we're going to try to do a cool little campaign around that here soon. But we thought it was going to happen sometime next year, and we flew past it pretty quickly. And so for those that, are always monitoring the market, whether it be for ultra modern stuff or just recently graded grails that you're looking for, you'll have to start getting used to the 9-digit cert numbers as opposed to 8.
That'll be strange because usually you see the 1 and you think, "Oh, it's a really old card. They must have like slabbed this or something." Like I think one of yours that I got a photo of here, is it the Crusade, was starts in the 2s. So it's like, "Oh,
Yep.
this is an old one. He must have gotten this reslabbed or somebody did." But
Exactly. And to that point, there was a point like maybe a year ago, 18 months, when we were in the 80 millions, where I was actually sending in a bunch of Moss cards trying to get like 84, as many 84s as possible.
Yeah. Well, now it's somebody who was chasing the 100 millionth is shit out of luck. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
we tried. That's cool. It's funny. I always think of, maybe you guys think this too. God, there's got to be just a crazy PSA graveyard out there. When I say this, I'm talking about the like prospects or these cards that people graded at the time thinking, oh my gosh. And now it's like, these are literally coasters for a beer can or something.
Yeah.
I wonder what percent would fit that threshold. You know what I'm getting at? It'd be kind of
Yeah, we actually saw a fair bit of that. So obviously during COVID and the boom of the hobby, PSA was impacted directly by growing their business tremendously. And this was before I started working there. But millions and millions of cards were submitted to PSA when they weren't prepared to grade millions and millions of cards because they were kind of like a small and humble business at that point. And so it created this backlog of cards that we worked through and even closed down the business for a matter of months to try to grade. But you don't pay for the cards that you send into PSA until they're graded and they come back to you. And because people were waiting so long for these cards, and those cards that they send in had no business being graded and they went down in value so much, a ton of people's like credit cards bounced back and they never paid for them. And so we had this whole
Also, there was a graveyard.
Graveyard, yeah.
What did you
And
guys do? What do you guys even do with those at that point? Because it's
so
your property past a certain time,
I think the standard thing that we do with them is like we've used them for giveaways and stuff, and we use them to help to stand up like our eBay marketplace and stuff. But the big thing there is that we can't make a profit on them, so we can only sell them for the price it costs us to grade them. And so, early on when we were starting up our eBay marketplace store, there was actually a ton of cards from that batch of cards that we sold at like tremendously deep discounts, like $12 a card type of thing. So
like the Rui Hachimura, what's that set? Damn, that right around that time that
2019 Prism, man. I was just looking through some cards the
but
other
it was
day.
also the what the heck's the name of this? It has the bunch of different sets in the one bot in the same set. You know what I'm talking about? Chronicles, yeah. Around that time, it's just like everyone is grading every Luminance, every Recon of every single rookie.
I was just looking through some boxes the other day, and like I ripped an ungodly amount of 2019 Prism and bought a lot on the secondary market. And I have a box from all the basketball rookies that year that probably has anywhere from like 20 to 50 of each player's base rookies, just like in top loaders. And I can still remember being at the Dallas show, card show during COVID. It was like the only show going on, and the market was super hot. And I had like 12 Tyler Hero base Prism PSA 10s that the market value at the time was like $300. And I remember selling like 6 of them and holding on to 6 of them because I was like, I could have like sold them in 10 seconds. Yeah. They were going like hotcakes, and I was like, "No, these are going to go up in value." And now it's like a $10 card.
Yeah.
So.
That's the I feel like the very for me at least, a very cheap learning lesson because thankfully I wasn't over leveraged or something at that point. But
Yeah.
it's funny how that era of stuff, like the lessons I learned from being in a bubble. I mean, we literally were in a bubble, and now you see other examples in your own life. I'm like, I'm sticking away from that. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. But
So
yeah. Awesome. So thanks, Mikey. So we'll wrap up here with like a fast five. This should be just five quick questions, hopefully not too tricky,
cool.
but I'll toss a couple curveballs at you maybe. But we'll start with just curious, what's your favorite NFL team? I know you like Randy Moss, and I'm not familiar with what team you like, but I know, again, growing up in Indiana, I don't know what you would cheer for when you live there
Yeah, growing up, the Vikings were always my favorite team. I think I've fallen out of favor with them just a little bit as the years have gone on,
because you
and
became a
so
Packers fan. Is that?
yeah, exactly.
Oh, no.
No, but my favorite football team is my fantasy football team,
I've
and
never
my fantasy
experienced that.
football team is the reason why I can't have a favorite NFL team
Yeah.
because there's too much conflicting interest.
Yeah.
It makes it hard.
Yeah, I know people who do like 10 leagues and they're literally cheering for and cheering against every single
The
player.
same
I'm like,
player,
what
yeah.
are you doing? How is this fun
Yeah.
whatsoever?
But right
Um,
now, I like the Detroit Lions, which is
yeah,
weird for me to say because I rooted against them for so many years, but they're fun to watch, and I love Dan
yeah.
Campbell.
And they deliver for every fantasy player every single week.
Yeah,
You are
I
literally never disappointed if you have any of them, except for
yeah,
sorry, Sam Laporta people probably, but everyone
yeah,
else has delivered. But
yeah, I've got Gibbs, Montgomery, and, Williams on my team, so it's been
mhm.
pretty great.
So good. So curious, 98 draft, Moss is in there. I've enjoyed dabbling a bit, just collecting some of the different players in that set, Moss, Manning, Woodson. Is there another player you feel you would collect in that set if you had to go after some rookies to pair up with Moss? And it could be a wild card too, maybe somebody I didn't list.
Yeah, Woodson's one I've always thought about, I think is pretty interesting. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any guys from the '98 class that really stuck out to me. I'm trying to think.
Fred Taylor's the other one that I always
Yeah,
forget is
Fred
in there.
Taylor, he didn't really do it. There's
Heinz
definitely
Ward.
other players, like, one of the things I've always regretted about Moss coming out in '98 is the fact that he isn't in 1997 sets and, like, doesn't have a green or a red PMG.
Get the
But
time machine, Mikey. Go back.
yeah,
Tell him.
but, like, Jake Reed, who I was a fan of because he was on the Vikings, and then, like, Keyshawn Johnson are 2
Mhm.
ones that I've thought about collecting to be able to, like, buy some of those cards that maybe Moss isn't in the set, or like for example, like the Keyshawn Johnson 99 Gym Masters sold recently for like $4,000. Like that, I don't know if that would go up in value, but it'd be cool to own that card of
Yeah.
like a semi Hall of Famer that for a decent price.
Yeah, awesome. And then third question here is, what is a quick tip that you would give to somebody who is starting out as a player collector? Maybe something you've learned over time, especially maybe in the last year, like something you wish you could tell someone who's just starting out in player collecting. Is there any tip or tips that you could come to mind?
Yeah, I think is it's kind of dual, but the first is like to learn as much as possible. So like I've spent like tens and almost hundreds of hours reading blowout post forums from like 2015 about Randy Moss cards early on to understand the scope of his collecting and what cards were out there and what was important to them. And then the other one is just to create a network of people. Like that's the beautiful thing about the internet and social media is that if you're collecting a player, you're going to be able to find somebody that does too and like create relationships with those people. And for me, I think one of the things that really catapulted me was like create relationships, but also create like competition because at the end of the day, as you mature in your collecting, you're going to be competing with these other people who are your friends in your network for the same cards, and you can have some fun with it.
And I feel like, to your point too, good way to navigate and also a bad way to navigate that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Everyone has those people, I can't think of it. I'm just making this up, but of course, I'm sure most people have that person they know that wins everything. And like, secretly, you're
Yeah.
like, good for you, but you bastard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, honestly, like that was me for a long time. I feel like I was winning a lot of the auctions.
Mhm.
And then there was like a few Randy Moss cards that popped up on your feed, and I was like, hey, you beat me.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, there's a few I've grabbed over the years. I maybe my Moss collection is probably it's still about 10 or 12. I don't think I've sold anything in a long time, but I have like
yeah,
10
but
or
it's
12.
some of the best ones, especially some of the ones that people don't think about a lot. So
Yeah,
I think
those
you've done a
that certified's the one. I think that's the one I'd want next out of anything because
yeah.
it's reasonable. That's the thing about so many sets. It's like it's not 5 figures. It's like I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
You probably better than I, but it's in the hundreds of dollars more than likely, not in the
Yeah.
thousands, which I like. But yeah, it's one
Well,
of those.
I'll connect you to somebody after this. Maybe help you out in that arena.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Appreciate it. Um, uh, Complete curveball. Favorite Pokemon out of curiosity, because I also grew up with Pokemon.
Mm,
I have my binders
yeah,
back here. I'm gonna fling them out and show you, but I'm not
it
yet.
it's
So
changed, but my favorite Pokemon is Umbreon,
mhm.
um,
That's what
which
everybody
is
likes. I don't get now, because as a kid I was like never thought of it, but
yeah.
then now that I
Well,
pay attention, everyone's into these ones.
it wasn't until very recently when I got into Pokemon with my daughter that I had any time of day for the non-first generation
Yep.
Pokemon.
Same. Yep.
Uh, and I've grown out of that. Now I appreciate all Pokemon. But Umbreon's really cool. I just love that it's like a night Pokemon and it's all black. Like the aesthetic is really cool to me. But yeah, Umbreon's probably my favorite. I also like Riolu, which is
Mhm.
just, the
Lucario.
yeah, Lucario evolution line. And a lot of that's just attributed to like the shows we've been watching, like Pokemon Journeys on Netflix, and starting to kind of um, relate with some of the characters on there.
Awesome. And fifth and final question, what is your favorite card of the year? If you have one that
That
let's
I've
say
acquired.
yeah, maybe not even acquired, but like sitting, right today, if it's the
Mhm.
end of the year right now, let's say you look back and say this was the year of blank card. Like this is the
In
card I
my
enjoyed the most.
collection.
Yeah, that you like. It's a hard question.
Yeah, it's tough. I think like I think about a lot of different ones. It was cool to pick up like the first edition Charizard just because of like the nostalgia meaning of it, even though like, once a month you could hop on one of the major auction houses and like find one if you wanted to. But the answer I was going to have, which is not a card in my collection, but was one that really was kind of like the catalyst to a lot of the change that's happened in my collection, including selling some of my favorite cards, which is 99 Metal Universe Gym Masters. And so, like I said before, like I was trying to find that card. I had never seen it, I've never heard of it. And then it popped up in a collection earlier this year and changed hands and went to the number one Moss collector, who has over a dozen of his rookie one of ones. And even though I don't own it in my collection, I think that's the card that made me realize like you don't have to like try to climb the mountaintop of collecting your favorite player. And if I'm never going to have that card, I'll be able to sleep at night and can focus on other things instead of obsessively chasing that one card. So I think that one's the card of the year for me.
Probably not the easiest realization, but I'm sure once you had it, you felt like you said you probably sleep a little better at night.
Yeah, I mean, I wish. I mean, I'd trade my whole collection for it. But
Toss that out there at the end. Yeah, anyways, thanks so much, Mikey. This was super fun. Hopefully you guys enjoy. And be sure to reach out to Mikey on Instagram if you have any questions. I'm sure he's open to saying hi, or if you, again, just love the episode, want to tell him great episode. I'm sure he's receptive.
Definitely. Thanks, Austin. I appreciate the time.
Yeah.